Welcome, Trina, to Sweet Tea with Emily. I am always excited to have all of my guests, but I would say I feel a little bit like superstar status because everybody knows you, and not only like in Utah, like even on the national scene. Like you're such a big deal for being here.
You're so welcome. This is fun. I love the idea of sweet tea with Emily. It's wonderful. It's kind of like a chilled chat time. It'll be
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. If I get a lot of pictures anytime my friends or colleagues or business associates are out and about drinking sweet tea. I
Mhm.
I have like tons of text messages of people with their sweet tea now, and I love
Uh-huh.
it. Even though I was just in Tennessee and I drank way too much sweet tea. That is very Trina, since we're talking about sweet tea, what can I get you to drink?
So you know what I've been doing lately? I'm not right now. Right now, I've just got my normal coffee. I got my big tea going. But I've had this really great Christmas spice tea lately that's been fabulous. And so I've been drinking that almost every day along with my Theraflu. So if I sound a little bit hoarse today, that's been my other go-to drink lately is a lot of Theraflu this week. There's like some nasty cold that's been going around and my son and I have been having fun with that this week. So
I
so I
I do
stopped
hear
eating
that.
the drink. That's what I'm doing is trying to calm down that throttle in my throat right now.
Oh my goodness. I do hear it in your voice a little bit now that you bring it up. It is going around.
Yeah.
Um, Trina, I never introduce my guests because I don't ever feel like I can do them justice. So tell everybody who you are. Let's have you do a self intro.
Yeah, and I might mix it up a little bit because I think most people know me about the work I do with tech moms. I'm really passionate about seeing more women find independence and life transformation through technology careers. That's been kind of my thing these last few years and why I talk so much and probably why people know who I am is because I don't stop talking about it, right? Like that's been the number one. But kind of a funny story is I published this book this year. So this is my book I've done.
I
Yay.
have it. I have it.
Yay.
And I have to tell you why I love that book is I don't read a lot of books. But that's like a checklist, agenda, inspiration.
Yeah.
Like it's not like any other book I've had. So please keep continue.
Yeah. So I was gonna share like this is something that happened with me in this book, kind of like something I haven't really shared with many, but it's in the book. But I'm writing and I'm talking about finding your life purpose and meaning and looking back on your life and the things that you were drawn to and you got energy from and things like that. And I was in my car and I heard this. I don't know if you remember Big Audio Dynamite. They had this big song called Rush. And it's like talking about getting a change of atmosphere. Well, when I was in high school, I actually ran for homecoming queen, which is not my thing at all. I actually ran for VICA, Vocational Industrial Clubs of America. I was in drafting.
I would have
And
totally pegged you as a beauty queen, just for the
not
record.
not at all. But I was the only female, so I got elected, right? I was the first female that had ever been in the club. And so they nominated me to run for homecoming queen. And I did this little skit of I was dressed up in this maid outfit and I went onto the stage and I'm mopping and I had my dad record this he had a really deep kind of Johnny Cash voice and he recorded this thing is your dead end stuck in a job? Is your career going nowhere? And then it spotlight turns and my friend Greg's sitting over in front of a computer and he's typing away. He's like, "You need to get into Vocational Industrial Clubs of America." And I hand him my mop and we do this little dance. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've been doing this my whole life." Like in high school, I didn't even realize I've been looking at how do I transform and transition people's lives and careers into technology industries clear back in high school, but it didn't connect with me until I started writing and writing this book. So that kind of gives you a little bit of this has been something in me from the very beginning, you know.
I love that. I love that you can like even from a young age reach audiences and inspire people to think about something they're probably not thinking about when they're 15, 16, 17 years old, you know?
And I didn't connect the dots. That's what I was doing for, it's now been 30 years. So, it's kind of funny that these things in our lives are just there. If we take time to kind of reflect and go, oh yeah, that is kind of where I get energy and maybe where my passions lie and where my purpose might be, so it's kind of fun.
Well, it explains kind of why you probably have this superstar status, at least locally, of what everything you touch and just how you can put it on the map. And I love that you decided to write a book. Is this your first book? I know that's a really naive question.
No, it is. And it was, when they say it's a hard thing to do, it is one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I self-published it. I created my company as a publisher because when I went to go publish, they're like, well, you have to have 500,000 TikTok followers in order to get published anymore. I think the minimum was like 250,000 was the response. And I'm like, well, I still want to write the book. Let me just go figure this out. So I ended up self-publishing it. It's been a process. There's been a lot of ups and downs and starts and stops and refiguring things out, but glad we got it done.
Tell me just briefly, I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but how long did it take you? What was your process? How'd you stay motivated through it? Talk me through all that before stuff.
There's so much. It was 2 years. And I didn't want to write a book. Randy Garn, I don't know if you know Randy, but I didn't know him. He reached out to me on Instagram and he's like, hey, you want to come in my office? I want to talk to you. I'm like, all right, it's Randy Garn. I'll go figure out what this is. So I go to his office and we chat for a little bit. And then he goes, I just feel prompted to tell you, you need to write your book. And I'm like, what book? I don't want to write a book. I've had people, because I do so much speaking and stuff, they're like, you need to have a book. It's like part of, and I'm like, I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I don't want to write it. But he planted that seed and it just stuck, right? I couldn't let it go. Once it was like, okay, now, so I started just making phone calls. How do I do this? What do I need to do? How do I go through this? And I've written for years, but it's always been like technical writing, or I'm very technical in my writing, and so it's been like a learning process on learning how to write your story and connect and some of those things. And I hired one editing team. My editor got carpal tunnel and couldn't type. I just had all of these starts and stops and interruptions, and will this work and will it not work, and I got to find a new team, and now I've got to and so this is really where the idea of orchestration in life comes, is it's not a no, but maybe not a not now. And so within those 2 years, it wasn't like I was writing the whole 2 years. There was times where I'm like, okay, not now, put a pause on it. And that's kind of where that orchestration I do is come back, come forward, pause, go, a lot of that. And then finally got to the point where I'm like, I've got to finish this. I just have to finish it. And so there's an actual dent in my couch where I sat for a number of, once I was like, I'm going to get this done, right? And I set goals and I was like, okay. And there was days, it was 10, 12 hours a day of just sitting, writing, going through. A lot of it I did in hospital rooms with my dad, who was going through cancer. And in ICU rooms, a lot of this stuff, that's where life is I've got this goal. It's not a no, but it's going to be done maybe a little bit differently than I planned. It wasn't just to sit down and write it all out. It was do it when I can and where I can find those moments. So.
And you had to be so inspired to kind of keep it, on track. I don't think I'll ever be able to write a book. I really don't. Elisa Garn, speaking of Randy Garn, Elisa Garn's like, Emily, when you have a thought, just do a voice memo and start collecting your voice memos so that you're at least open to publishing a book. Because she's she's going to hopefully,
Yeah.
I won't steal her thunder, but she's
Yeah.
a big proponent of trying to encourage me, and I'm sure others, in getting onto the circuit. And I mean, are you going to New York and doing a book signing, or have you already done that? Like, tell me. I'm so focused on your book right now. I'm so sorry. I'm so proud of you. So tell me what you're doing with it. Like, tell me what's going on now with the book, and then you can take me in another direction outside the book if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did go to New York. It was a little chaotic because I went out there to speak for Women in IT conference. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing is mainly speaking. I do a lot of training and corporate training. And so usually it's brought in the books as a supplement to my speaking and consulting that I'm doing and training. So it's been one of those where it's an enabler. The book itself, the marketing takes a ton of work. And so I'm not doing the traditional marketing. I've gone and done the Barnes and Noble, book signings. That's just not me. So I'm trying to find my own path through like publishing and being an author. My preference is I love speaking.
Yeah.
I love public speaking. I love, conveying a message and seeing those transitions. Like that's what I love doing. And the book's an enabler to support that. And when I started to put together like why I wanted to write a book, because I don't want to just write a book for the sake of writing a book. It's a ton of work, right? And really what I wrote this for is, and where I found my voice is that talking to my tech mom students, as I saw them trying to go through these life transformations. I originally was going to call this book Balance is Goat Shit, because you just can't balance it all. My dad convinced me to change the title. I might republish it and go back to it, honestly.
We'll have like a black version.
Yeah,
like
I'll have two versions. I'll have the nice, harmony. Or he's like, do you want to be known as the harmony girl or the goat shit girl? And I'm like, I'm kind of both. So maybe I'll do both. I don't know. I can do whatever I want, right?
I think my dad and your dad are kind of alike. My dad's continually trying. He gave me the same advice.
Yeah, but I'm like, I'm still kind of like the balance is goat shit. You just can't do it all. And so as I was writing, I just really wanted to make sure that the individuals that I was writing to understood, first of all, they're not alone in these transformations and how to re-envision your life and how to find your purpose and how to center yourself on you. I mean, that's the core of all of this. Is too often what I saw happening is they were trying to please or make sure everybody else was okay, and they were getting lost in the process. And so that's really where that life first model I came up with was, how do I center on what my needs are, know what those are, so that I can then coordinate and better communicate with those around me on how do we come to an agreement on how we're going to enable everyone, including yourself. Right.
Well,
and so we got there.
I love that. I got made fun of. I joined a book club as soon as I moved out to Utah, and I'm still in the book club today. They are my dear friends. They're way more than book clubs. And the very first meeting I was at, and I'm like 22, just out of college, they asked me my favorite book, and I did like 7 Habits of Highly Effective Leaders, kind of by Stephen Covey. And they all laughed at me. But what I was trying to communicate to them is, when I read and studied and kind of did a report on this book in college, it taught me, like, I have to take care of me and the basics first and foremost if I'm going to kind of keep growing up this pyramid. So there was that version of kind of your messaging, your book, who you are, the message that you share, combined with the name of my company, Higher Integrated. Like, when I decided to open up Higher Integrated 3 years ago, I had 2 years to think about how I was going to do this because of a non-compete. And I said, man, I want Higher Integrated to be integrated into my life, into my candidates' lives, into my hiring managers' lives, because this isn't like time for hiring. This isn't time for work. This is integrate us into your space when it
Yeah.
makes sense.
I
Because
love that.
I'll tell you, there are times at 11 a.m. on a Thursday, I feel like I need to be a mom and I feel like I need to take my kid to the zoo. And I'm mom. I'm integrating my mom life in that
Yeah.
moment. It's a
Yeah.
very conscientious decision. And that's where I connect so much with your message and what you tell people. Like,
Yeah.
decide what you're going to do in that moment and own it and be okay with not being the other stuff in your life for
Right.
that moment. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. All in. The commit. It's commit to that path and that moment and own it. And then, okay, now I'm going to shift to the next thing and the next thing. I love the integrated. I've heard that a lot. Life integration, right?
Mm-hmm.
Life work integration, life work harmony. It's, as I was doing the research for a lot of this, I read a lot of like deep research. I decided, my first versions of this book were very technical, being kind of the technical background. I had all this research and, and I'm like, you know what, you're better. Let's tell the stories. People like the stories. So I actually have all this research, but I decided not to go that route.
Well,
But
you
it's,
remember the stories, right? You don't
yeah,
remember stats, but you remember the
yeah,
stories and you remember how you
exactly.
feel, right?
Yep. Yeah. But there is a lot of that and I talk about this, like my version of harmony and what life integration looks like is going to be different than yours. And I think this is where a lot of companies are struggling right now, right? With this, remote working to hybrid to, required in office and really struggling with this idea of like forced mandated policies company wide. I'm like, you can't do that. And it really needs to be in my perspective is at the manager level, right? Each team is going to have different deliverable requirements, results that are needed. And when you're looking at what has to be done, it may be you have to be in office for whatever that team is and what that goal is. But some may have some flexibility. And then they may have unique things that are happening within their individual team members' lives that they need to be having conversations about and saying, hey, for the next 6 months, I need to handle this. And then I'll be in the office and then I'll go back to hybrid and then I'll go remote. I think these standardized policies are causing too much conflict when they're set at a like corporate level, like this is how we're going to run. And I think instead training the management teams on how to have these conversations and how to integrate life and work is what's needed going forward.
Oh, the timing of it's perfect. I mean, tell me what are some stories of inspiration of folks that have come to you where you've been able to kind of shift this mindset, because it is, you've got a lot of uphill mind shifts to change, especially when it's coming from the top down and people don't feel like they can really empower that. So give me a little bit of insight as to maybe someone that's come to you where you've been able to impact a before and after change. Is that a fair on the spot question? I hope so.
It is. But what's a great thing is I have so many coming into my head right now.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I was like, I always commit to my guests. I won't put you on the spot. I won't like ask anything like awkward or that you're not prepared for. It's just, and here I am putting you on the spot and asking you a question. So I'm glad.
Yeah, I'm gonna it's really amazing the work that I'm able to do with Tech Moms. It's so fulfilling on so many levels. It's something that, I wrote my thesis paper in college in 1996 when I did my computer science degree on why women should go into computer science. So this has been like a lifelong dream of mine to do what I'm doing today. It's dream fulfilled, right? And every time we go to one of these graduations and you hear these life transformations that just happen in such a short time, in 2 months, they're going from complete fear and doubt and not knowing to going, hey, this is my path. Here's where I'm going. Here's what I'm going to do. And it's just like complete switches in their mindset, just being enabled, saying, I now have the resources and the community and the support and the confidence to be able to own my life. Right. And that's not just me. That's my whole team. I have an amazing team. My 2 co-founders, Mikkel Blake and Robin Scribner, are just incredible. And the work that we've been able to do here. one of the things when I go in and I start talking to some of them, I try and keep it simple, just from mindset shift. I'm just going to stick to a simple trick I use, um, which is trying to pull the weeds of what I call the four destroyers: the fear, doubt, shame, and guilt. Right. And so I call it, like, if you think about your life and your mind like a garden, you're pulling weeds. You're pulling these weeds from your garden all the time of things that are going to drag you down. And so I call it pluck it and chuck it. That's the easy way for me to get people to remember. And so I've been like, okay, is that imposter syndrome comes up a lot. And I'm like, everybody feels doubt. It's not just women. It's not just, I'm like, everybody feels this. Everybody has doubts as they go through. It's identifying it, pulling it, pluck it, and chuck it, right? Or you can flip it and turn it in. Now, what's the positive of that? And so I had one of my team members come and say that to me, and be like, yeah, every time I do it, I'm like, I pluck it and chuck it. So it's just like, sometimes it's kind of fun to hear them say, hey, I remember what you said. Or, if I say something, they'll come back, hey, you said this. And I'm like, I forgot I completely said that at all. And they're like, hey, this kind of changed something for me. And that's so rewarding for me to hear those types of transformations.
It's so simple yet powerful that you can be in control and you can decide how you're going to approach it. A really silly example that I can relate to is I was recently training a group of accountants on, the value of social capital, and like, if they don't like networking, maybe why they should consider it, and approaches that they could take, and maybe how they can make it not awkward. And I had to just open up the conversation, because it was very much so kind of a roundtable discussion. I had to just open up the conversation with saying, no one loves it. No one loves like going into a room and like, most people are uncomfortable going up to someone and introducing themselves and not knowing how they're going to be received. I said, I have insecurities every day when I go up and introduce myself to someone and thinking, but I have to just remind myself, like, I'm going to be the one to initiate it, and I can be in control of this. And the worst thing is maybe they don't like me. So what?
So what?
I'll find somebody else that maybe does. And you've got so much to gain and so little to lose by doing it. I just had to like clear the air with the room, right?
I love it. I love it.
It's a silly example compared to yours, where you are literally changing lives of women that are increase their earnings tenfold, and they have a beautiful career, and they can support their family, and they can start thinking about things that they never thought about, like vacationing and enjoying time with their family. Like, I love everything that you and your team like have done. I'm the biggest girl fan ever. So we're on the 23-minute mark. I know you have an appointment to go to right now. We're going to end with the lightning round. It's going to be all about goats and Barbies. And before I start doing that, can you tell people why I'm going to talk with you about goats and Barbies for those that don't know?
Yeah, just real quick. A few years ago, I was speaking to students. I do a lot of student speaking, and I'm like, I got to make this fun, right? And so I started thinking about what would be fun. And I'm like, well, I grew up, and some of my biggest influencers of I get asked a lot of why did I go into tech? It was because of goats and Barbies. And so I share a story about, growing up, I love Barbies. And my Barbies would get really bored, though. Like, you can only put on so many outfits and decorate your house so many times before you get really bored. And so I didn't have like the pink Corvette. Our family couldn't afford that. And so what I did have, my parents gave me erector sets, and I build motorized cars for my Barbies. And so I would take them out, and there was probably like the first ATVs that Barbies had. And so I just early on, I reflect back on some of these fun things. That's kind of where the Barbies come from. So I had a friend of mine as well introduced me. I met Tan France once, and she introduced me as Tech Barbie. And she's like, did that offend you? And I'm like, no, that's awesome. It's an and, right? You can be an engineer and love design at the same time. It's not.
Lots of ands.
That's right.
So, what is your favorite Barbie?
I like the classic. I'm just a good old classic
You're a good
Barbie.
old classic girl.
What do they call it? Stereotypical Barbie? Is that what it is in the movie? I think so.
Oh, confession, I haven't seen the movie yet.
Oh, you haven't.
It's not because I don't want to. I just, as you know,
all right. Next.
So next question, goat. Tell me about, like, do you have a pet goat?
No, growing up, we had a goat named Casper, the unfriendly goat.
Casper, the unfriendly.
Yeah, Casper, and so Casper, my brothers and sisters and I would play a lot of games with the goats. I had 9 brothers and sisters, and one of the things that I used to do is I would tie a rope to the goat and put it in, and tie a wagon then to Casper, and then I'd stick my little brother Mike in the wagon, and I'd slap the goat and see how far the goat would run across the lawn before he'd fall over. And I had a little log book, and I would measure the distance, and I would keep a log of like all the time and measurements. And my brother loved it. He just bounced around like he thought it was a game. I'm hoping I never really injured him, but it was just me, like operational efficiency. I was figuring out what the averages were and the outliers, like, I did this with our goats growing up. And so it's just kind of funny. As I look back, if you think back on the things that you do again, and I'll do that with some of the high school students and college students I speak with them, like, what did you like to play with growing up? And they get really excited. It's kind of fun when you can tie some of those things together.
Those are some of the best interviews I've conducted, is when we start trying to find the connection, correlation. Well, Trina, I swear, I always wish I could do these longer, but everyone's telling me to be shorter. There's nothing short and sweet about my interviews, but other than you have been so kind with your time, and I have so many more questions and stories I could get. But last question, next speaking event, so we can come and find out more about you and what you're up to.
Right now I've been taking a break, as we talked about both of us losing our fathers. I kind of put a pause in things for a little bit. And so I'm just going to enjoy the holidays for the next month, take some downtime, and then this coming year, just hit it off, keep it going from there. So I'll putting it out there. Follow me on, you can go to my website, trinaceleste.com, or I'm on Instagram at Trina Celeste or LinkedIn. So, connect with me and find out what's up next this coming year.
I've got to come to one of your next speaking events. So I'll be there. Thank you for your time, and have a really good lunch.